Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition. I am Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda. And today's quote, "You must have long-range goals to keep you from being frustrated by short-term failures," from Charles C. Noble.
Amen.
Yeah. I was watching Top Chef the other day, and one of the people on the show who actually got voted out kind of early was kind of like, coming on here reinvigorated my interest in food and like kind of pursuing excellence in a funny way.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of this because I was kind of thinking about getting excited about achieving sort of a like some future state that is interesting and beyond just kind of incrementally getting a little bit better for the sake of whatever. I don't know why, right? Like, let's be a little more efficient tomorrow. I think it's just it is easy to kind of burn out on that, and it feels exciting to go like, would it be possible to X? Or like, I don't know, in developing products, I think it's really easy to seek like make something that's a little bit better and then sort of make it more budget, because like you look at how much it's going to cost to do some really exquisite detail and you're like, you know what, like it's not really necessary, and then you end up with something that's like good instead of something that is like really excellent and maybe weirdly expensive.
Right.
And there's room for both, but I think just having a goal, like there's so much technology that is developed in the arts because some artist comes up with some bizarre set of requirements.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we got to hit them. Like, it's not logical. Right. It's not meant to be an economically, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very relatable.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit, kind of from two different perspectives. But one is that as I move away from working actively on machines on a day-to-day basis, I still do a fair amount of that, but it's certainly not where I'm supposed to be, quote unquote, according to how we've internally defined what my role is. I have to find ways to be interested and motivated about work on a day-to-day basis. And when the main thing that I find exciting, right, is like developing the process in the shop and like continuing to grow our capability and grow the business. And I think that's good. But what I've been thinking about a bunch recently is that that's not, fundamentally, that's not like an end state. That's like being interested in a growth state. And that if I don't fairly soon come up with a pretty clear idea of what our end state, what we want that to look like in terms of scale and capability and customer mix and like all of these things, it'd be very easy to get sort of like trapped in an infinite loop of just like developing and attempting to grow and potentially very much like overshoot where we actually want to be. And like we've talked about a bit, I think there's these, I don't know, they're almost like resonant frequencies in businesses, like these sweet spots where sort of like you all of a sudden you have the right mix of like the amount of work, the number of tasks, the number of people, the number of machines, the capability. And in those sweet spots, like a business can do really amazing things. And when you're out of the sweet spots, you're really just like fighting a lot of very basic stuff of like on a day-to-day basis, this person doesn't know what to do like 10% or half the time. And like that causes disruption in their day, and then they're frustrated, and that brings down the vibe in the shop. And then it's just like, and like some very small thing like that can have like pretty severe cascading consequences through a business. This is a bit of a ramble, I guess, but I've just been thinking a lot about needing to come up pretty soon with a vision of where we want that sweet spot to land. And obviously it's going to be somewhat iterative, right? Like you can't perfectly predict where it's going to be.
Right.
But sort of like have the antenna up for when you start to get close so that you can kind of like zero in on actually hitting it instead of just like fly right by and not even know that you passed it.
Yeah.
Because it's really addicting to just keep being like, okay, we're just going to get the next cool thing, and we're going to develop this process so we can go faster, and we're going to do this so we can like be more efficient, and potentially completely miss the point on like, oh, you were actually supposed to take the exit off the highway there, and Eden is, a mile off the road, and instead you blasted past, and now you're headed to like industrial wasteland.
I just missed my exit yesterday on the way to an appointment.
Speaking of,
yeah, it's a bummer. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's something, definitely. Well, we should talk. Yeah, austere is definitely lacking that end state goal. I think I have like pretty clear goals on the product side, but not sort of on that bigger, like, what does the business look like all in side.
To be clear, I do not have a clear vision as well. I just know that I need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, that's probably right. Interesting.
We're kind of at this point where like starting to add people is less scary, and starting to add machines is also less scary. Like we just have enough of a flywheel going where it's like, okay, yeah, a little extra money every month. Like we need to think about this, but it's not like a life or death decision necessarily. And I could see that getting pretty out of hand quickly and just like kind of ballooning and ending up with a bunch of bloat, without like a really clear vision for what are those machines doing? What are those people doing? How does this all fit together into a concise, a concise vision that everyone's role is clearly defined and we know exactly where we're going. And anyway, that was a ramble, but
no, interesting.
And I'm not the first one to say these things, that's for sure.
Well, we decided to crack a book open sort of together. Well, two books together, I suppose. And it is the Shigeo Shingo Production Management System. And I guess nominally we were going to read the first chapter, but in classic Shigeo form, the first chapter is 3 pages. 1, 2, 3, yeah. And so, anyway, there's definitely some stuff in there that I thought would be worth commenting on. Separately, I was also cracked open SMED the other day.
Oh, uh-huh.
And had a couple points about that, but yeah. What do you see?
As you so what's the word? Well, anyway, as you so succinctly put it, his first chapter is basically I am a boss. Here's why I am a boss. So I didn't get much from the first chapter besides that, but I think maybe I'll just read through his 5 points here, or 6 points. He's basically like, here's what you can do if you follow my rules. Or lay the groundwork by using SMED systems to cut setup changeover times by 99%. Is that all? Is that really? Then make a process type improvements in machining or processing. Adopt a zero defects quality control system, i.e. use source inspections in Pokeyoke. Techniques of low cost 100% inspections and immediate action. This eliminates defects by incorporating inspection into processing. Eliminate transport labor costs by using a layout system designed to reduce transport to 0. I love how he's just always like, it's not like cut by 30% or cut by 10%. He's always like 99%, take it to 0. Like there is no half measures. Use synchronized production and the full work system to eliminate process delays. Clearly recognize the lot delays that conventional Western production systems overlook, use flow operations to eliminate lot delays, cut production cycles by 99%, and produce only after demand has been confirmed. These measures will reduce finishing goods inventories to zero, and through the use of a one-piece flow system, eliminate delays between processes. Cut labor costs by 60% or more using these approaches to eliminate transport and delays. And then he was given 2 honorary degrees by various international, highly accredited, highly acclaimed universities.
Yep.
So that's basically it. He's a boss.
Yeah. I think what I enjoy about reading Shigeo Shingo, and you kind of touched on this, is that it is easy to go into work and look around and find some little thing that's inefficient. And like, not easy, like, I don't know, it's taken years to get better at it, and I think I'm better at finding ones that are going to be more impactful, but sometimes not, and sometimes they're just like, I make little improvements that are like, quality of life. The other day I hung our broom and dustpan on the wall and like shadow boarded it with e-tape because every day when I looked for the broom, it was somewhere slightly different, or very different, which is just really annoying. And that's cool, but I think this kind of thing, like reading that point about reducing transport to zero, I was then thinking about like our layout, right? Like, wow, we do move the stuff, we put it into bins there, then we carry it over here and set it there, then we, there's just a lot of movement, and if you benchmark to zero, that becomes starkly apparent. I don't know. I think it's an interesting. It's like like zero-based accounting, right? And like
you told me about this. I haven't actually read about it or anything yet.
It's basically that every year, if you run a big organization like in Precision, and you go like, our quality department has a tooling budget of $30,000 per year, right? Mm-hmm. That's what most organizations do. And then next year you go like, okay, well, what are you using this year's budget for?
Yeah.
And then you go, well, last year we spent $5,000 on this stuff. We spent, $5,000 on trainings. And so you sort of assume it'll be the same instead of going like, okay, no, your budget is zero. Like, start from scratch, right? What are you going to spend money on? And you just tend to get budgets that are way lower. And I think that's kind of the same thing, as if you take your current state as the starting point.
Yeah.
Which of course it is, but if you mentally take it as the starting point, you're probably not going to come up with something that is radically different. Right? Yeah. I think you have to like have a very clear set point at where the target is, which would be zero.
It's kind of like using the like the negatives versus positives sort of framing, right? Like if you talk about reducing negatives, you can only go so far. But if you talk about increasing positives, you can go to infinity. And it's not the same, right? Because you're going to zero, which is, that's a finite point. But in terms of improvements, that is actually infinity. So it's more or less, right?
Right.
Like that point will never be achieved, really, probably. Hence 99% everywhere in his descriptions. There's always a little bit more.
Right. Well, zero defects.
Sure. That, yeah.
Is interesting. And that one too. I was thinking like, where are we creating defects? Like, okay, as an example, we use a tool probe that's just like the touchy type. What are those called? Whatever it is. In the CNC,
touch
the
trigger.
tool comes down and touches on the end. And it's
touch trigger probe.
Yeah. So we use one of those. I looked at getting a laser when I got the machine, and it was $15,000, I think, for a laser probe.
Oh, for tool setting. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. For tool setting. And so I didn't get it because I think the other one was like, I forget, 1,500 or something, 2,000. Okay. I don't remember what it was. But spending as much as like on a used Camry just felt a little crazy. But source inspection, the concept is like, if a worn tool is creating the defect, instead of inspecting the defect, you should inspect the tool because that's the source of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I could go do like diametric inspections. You know, we just had a corner round issue, which was tool related. Like I could catch those, but realistically, like tomorrow, am I going to go spend $15,000 and then reprogram a lot of our programs to check for those issues, even if it's between batches? Like right now, there's no inspection essentially. You know, that's automated of the tools. I don't think I will, both time and money wise. That just seems really hard. But then I was kind of thinking, like, am I just missing these massive upsides because I don't want to like do the hard thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what would happen if we had 0 defects?
Yeah, for sure.
So this isn't an exact one-to-one, but there's this idea of like a hill climbing heuristic or a peak seeking heuristic, right? Where finding a local optimum, you might completely miss a much higher peak. And it's not exactly that, but it's sort of like, I guess sometimes you have to go down into the valley, and the valley might be economic valley, or a time valley, and then to get up a really much bigger peak on the other side. And maybe that is a strong analogy because
I think it is. Yeah, that's like a huge investment to go down into the valley. There's a lot of risk, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort.
Yeah, and you're kind of sitting pretty on a local low peak.
Yeah. Like the view's pretty good here.
And that's not to say you should either. I don't think there's any should about it, right? Yeah. And actually, like, my big business lesson of 2024, I think, has to do with being more careful and diligent with invested time and money to know when I'm going to get to a return on that. Because I think I kind of put too many irons in the fire. Yeah. And it wasn't catastrophic by any means, but kind of looking at 2024, I'm like, man, we really, just as one example, and this one actually I don't have any regrets, but like we spent a long time messing around with a robot to do robotic paint.
Yeah.
And I don't regret that one because I think it's a direction we want to continue to move. And so learning about it is okay. And I didn't spend that many thousands of dollars on it.
But the timing was off.
I mean, yeah. And like we didn't launch a new product, right? Like it displaced other things. So
yeah, totally. I have similar thoughts. Like I came into 2025 with like a pretty clear idea of where to head. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we're almost halfway through the year. And we've switched tack on several things. And a few of the things we just have not made that much progress. So what are we doing wrong here? You know, and not to say we can't get them across the line still. We have 7 months still to go.
Right.
And the end of the year is like an arbitrary goalpost. But I think it's still a good reflection that, like, I mean, maybe the goals I started out with were incorrect and our shifting is good, right? Like maybe we were putting the cart before the horse on some things, or they just weren't realistic. But still, the point stands that I feel a little bit like a dog chasing a squirrel. And, you know, maybe it's actually, you know, a rabbit and we're going to be very happy when we catch it and it's going to be a delicious meal. But it's hard to tell in this moment.
Extended metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, one thing that I came across reading the book was, and we've talked about this before, the ongoing struggle to understand how Shigeo Shingo defines operations versus processes. One kind of curious thing is I just was like, I will Google that. And what came up was that in most business terminology, the operations refers to the firm or the entity as a whole as an operation. And a lot of the business texts seem to, that is like the macro scale. And then processes are the individual things within that do stuff.
They like they're one level? I think they share the terminology process. No,
they share the terminology process. Yeah.
And then I see. And then like one level below process. Well,
Yeah.
in Shigio's world, it's not one step below. It's actually on a completely different axis. So for those who are listening, I don't know if you can Google it to get an image, but essentially it's an inscrutable cube with various arrows and symbols drawn in it. And the premise is that you have operations on your x-axis, and it doesn't really matter, but say your x-axis, and then processes on your y-axis. And so you have a two-dimensional, what does he call it? Anyway, two-dimensional plane, I guess, where the two interact, and that is production, and then production is on the z-axis or something like that.
It's very confusing. But you look at it and you're like, I feel like there is some secret that he understood here that he's trying to communicate, and if we dig long enough, maybe we'll comprehend it.
Here's my thought. I don't have high conviction in this. My thought is this. Basically, in the preamble, he says that most people who analyze production basically look at a process as a, like, tip to tail stacking of a bunch of operations. And so to reduce the process, you have to shrink each one of those pieces. And I think what he's saying is that is not, like, that as a starting point is going to really significantly limit your ability to improve things. And so really you should be looking at the process as, what are the things that need to happen? Not operations, but like, what are the transformations to the material or that need to happen, and now let's achieve that. And you have to tease them apart, I guess.
There's that. There was one thing that really like kind of drove it home for me last night, actually reading the book, was he used the example of applying SMED to a press operation, right? And I think the classic thing is like, you look at the press operation and you're like, okay, right now, when it's pressing, it does 30 cycles a minute. And that gives us this numbers of parts. If we get this to 40 cycles a minute, it will give us this number of parts and we'll speed up production, right? And then he just like backed out one kind of degree. And he's like, no, the process here includes the changeover. It includes everything like involved in running this press. Not just like, I think often as well, we get short-sighted and we're like, okay, the process is, it's not just operation plus operation, but it's also operation plus transportation, or operation plus sequencing, or operation.
It's the whole thing.
Lot size. And it's like, no, it's actually the whole thing. It's also your changeovers. It's like, it's also who's here when and how do their schedules overlap. And I think, but that subtle distinction of being like, it is the doing of the work to the material as well as everything involved in making the operation do the work to the material. That was kind of my distinction.
I think you're right. I think that's right. And there's a diagram, I think it's in SMED, where he shows people and machines on that plane, on the XY plane. And it includes a lot of the weighting and the process delays and everything else. So I think maybe you're right. I think it is, the whole thing. It sort of reminds me of our conversations at length about like the temptation to speed up cycle time on a CNC, that because of the nighttime and the way we run them is idle, easily 60-70% of its life. Right. It's not like, what portion of, like, even if we can only achieve 1 or 2 hours of runtime after we leave, right? Like, that would be sort of backing out into this more holistic view of like, what are we trying to achieve and what are the real constraints? Or even just not even constraints, even just like the realities.
If anyone wants to see this funny little visual, not because it will be helpful, but just to understand what we're talking about, search for Shigeo Shingo process operations distinction, and you will get a little AI overview with the, hopefully, Google's not the same for everyone. Hopefully you'll get the little the little 2D graph. If you want to really deep dive, you can find the 3D cube and be, ultimately confused.
Here, I'll post it on our on the Instagram.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
On that topic, actually, just this is not relating to the book, but just from in real life. I just jotted down here the other day that like constantly updating processes, while important right, like it's like it's the key tenet of this podcast and what we do. It has a lot of implications in terms of workload with documentation and keeping the information from getting stale, making sure that it's, properly propagated across an organization. And, nothing about me wants to stop improving, but it has been a tempering thing recently to be like, okay, so we can't just do this at a breakneck pace without also figuring out a really good system for managing these updates and improvements, because you can have, it's kind of like the classic, right? Like increasing like speeds and feeds to get something done, and then not noticing that, like, well, if you break a tool from that increase and it sets you back 20 minutes, you may have just lost all of your gains.
Yeah, or not realizing that it pushed it out of tolerance, and then you get an angry customer. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things. But similarly, I think it's really easy to get focused on these improvements and then realize that, like, oh, if everybody in the organization wasn't alerted to these improvements and how they function, all of a sudden you have multiple systems flowing that don't necessarily mesh, and there's huge potential for confusion, defects, mistakes, and then also just like grumpiness, right? Like, which is a critical thing. Like, the more and more I do this work, the more I realize that maintaining, like, I just refer to it as the vibe, but
morale.
Enjoyment, morale, all of those things is really, really important.
Yeah, I don't quite know how to balance those two, because I think of like aviation, there's this concept of like, don't test new on new, like no matter how small. It's like if you're putting a new bracket to hold an antenna, don't put the new antenna on. First, just put the new bracket on, right? Then put the... And it just seems absurd, but I think like similar to our sort of the last topic of just ROI and how quickly your business is turning like ideas into real benefit. I think that is super real, is like if you're constantly making changes, that's really tough. Actually, now that you said that, how, like, Toyota is involved in a safety critical field, right? Like, you can't just go like, oh, we can totally just put 3 screws in this engine mount and it's way faster.
I'm sure there's big guardrails on what they can and cannot change on the production line.
I'm sure there is, but I think the point from aviation is that sometimes a change has unintended consequences.
True.
And so, I don't know. I could imagine taking that to extremes, and I could also imagine that, I don't know. Yeah. And another point on that topic is, if you do start tinkering with things, I think that sort of gets back to like in this book, like if your target is zero waste, instead of like, if you're already taking your business apart, you may as well get like significant gains. But that, I guess, can cut both ways, right? Because that could also mean, hey, let's make this tiny change that doesn't really have significant far-reaching impact. Or it could be like, hey, let's rearrange our whole shipping department. Yeah. It's like, anyway.
Yeah.
Kind of a balance.
100%. Yeah. We're getting close on time here, but any of these, there's some juicy topics in the sheet here. Any particular ones that you want to jump into? Or
sure.
Top of mind?
Yeah, very top of mind for me is we got an inquiry from a customer, speaking of aviation, who's in aviation with the buckles, and they want full material certs on everything. And so then I was kind of curious how to flow material certs through Kanban.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sort of think of how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think we can build it maybe into Arda without a ton of difficulty, but also I kind of want to make sure it's done right. And just a good starting point is like, I'm curious how Toyota takes, so for people who don't know what a material cert is necessarily, if you get a batch of aluminum, it normally comes with some paperwork that's like, came from this batch,
Yeah.
I don't know, some testing on some whatever, tensile strength, etc.,
Yeah.
depending on the cert. But it is useful to know for us which buckles that aluminum went into, because if there's a defect or some issue down the line that is material related, if we have no idea which batch it came from, it's very hard to go back and say, well, anything, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything at all. For sure.
And if you wanted to do a recall, knowing the limits of that recall can be really difficult if you have no traceability.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's a bad batch, we had like doing water filtration years ago. If you have a bad batch of adhesive, which, even if it's
Yeah.
not which serial numbers, but which dates did you ship that adhesive?
Mm-hmm.
And right now we don't really track that, but it seems like we could, because every time a Kanban is triggered, you are triggering production, and you could sort of carry the certs through, right? Like almost like if you imagine two Kanbans touch each other and it like transfers the cert
Right. Right.
of like, hey, you're pulling from this batch
Yeah.
with this Kanban to produce to this Kanban. We're going to transfer the certs. I don't know. So just curious if anyone has any idea how Toyota does their material certs and supply chain traceability. I would be curious.
Yeah. It seems like it's not fundamentally complicated, but right, like associating something with some blocks, but the actual obstacles to like doing it operationally effectively while not creating a huge management burden seems
And then
a
if
big
you
lift.
like I think I have a clear idea of how to do it internally, but then the second you're shipping that to a customer, you sort of have to tie those records together.
Yeah.
And right now, we don't have a good way of doing that. And then you could say, well, let's only give it to people who care about the certs, right? So then we could add a line item on the invoice that is like, which isn't unusual to say like, hey, we charge this much for passing on the cert, or really for managing the certs.
I mean, effectively, you need to know whatever. If you need to know what some of them came from, you kind of need to know where all of them came from. So, like, you're going to have to track it for everything regardless.
Right. But if Arda made it easy, which I think we can, anyway, if Arda made it easy to do that, we would still need the operator who's doing this final assembly to sort of pass those from Arda through to the customer. I mean, it's definitely automatable where they just get an email that's like, hey, here's the full list of,
Yeah.
I don't know. But then there's things like
segment batches, like heavily. Remember that
sure.
shop tour where for unattended running on like the outfeed of a lathe, they would just put a little gate, and then so they would just like gate off like from like different hours or stuff that happened between, like
I don't.
end of day and the next morning.
Didn't John Grimsmo build a thing to sort of turn every X number of pieces? So they had...
Yeah, similar concept.
Okay.
But I think, because right now, like, you make a bunch of stuff, right? And then as soon as it comes out of the machine, it kind of forks to different colors and all of that stuff. So I think you'd have to either segment, like, production runs as a group, even if they were split across colors, so that you could track as a group. And then, or you would have to send particular runs to one color kind of a thing, so that it'd be easier to track.
I could imagine that, but right now we produce to a Kanban, right? Yeah. So step one, if we're producing component A, which is machined, when we pull aluminum, we would basically say, hey, we're producing this instance of this kanban with this material cert.
Yeah.
Then that's sitting on the shelf. If someone goes over to pull parts from that bin
Yeah.
to send to some color, our whip is the kanban that just got scanned. So we sort of know what material certs went into that batch.
Yep.
And we can do that sort of iteratively. I have very low confidence for our anodizer that when we send a component that same, like, this individual piece got turned black. They seem to batch stuff because we're shipping them repetitive components. They go like, oh, well, yeah, we can just like lump them together and ship it all out as one.
Well, it might affect your pricing, but most anodizers are very, heavily involved in aerospace and maintaining traceability. So
Yeah,
I would think this is well within their purview.
I'm sure it is. And I'm sure we could get that. And then there's questions about, like, if you run out of materials halfway through filling a kanban, let's say the aluminum blocks, now you have two sets of certs flowing through. Or if you go to pull machined components to fill something and you have to break into the next kanban, now you're flowing two certs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels very simple and then could get really tangled up very easily.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure we are thinking about it right. I think for the time being, just to sort of see what it's like, we're just going to do it very manually and keep that work separate if we get the work, which I'm not sure we will because our prices are significantly different than what they have been using.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, so if anyone knows or has any thoughts as to how Toyota deals with supply chain traceability, sort of, I guess, is that the term, I think?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah, send us a message or send me a
nice.
message.
It
On
just
that
got
note.
loud in here.
Yeah.
So I need to wrap it up. Thanks for everybody for following along. Keep getting in touch. Keep posting improvements. We love seeing it. We will continue to forge ahead into, on the one hand, no man's land, and on the other hand, a trail that has been trod many times before.
Yeah.
And share what we find out. So you can find me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, likenprecision.com on the internet, the pod at incrementalci on Instagram, and we have a Patreon. Go check it out.
You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. And Arda is arda.cards on Instagram and on the website. A bunch of people have been making free kanbans, which definitely makes me happy. Cool. Check out the tool. Give us any feedback. It's super helpful. And we will be back next week.
Alrighty. Adios.